What if a simple act of kindness towards a blind girl wasn't just charity, but a thread pulling you towards a destiny intertwined with dangerous secrets, a lost love, and a past your father never wanted you to uncover? Sarah, a struggling waitress, thought she was just helping a child. But she was about to step into a world where fortunes are stolen, lives are threatened, and a father's hidden legacy could change everything. Could her compassion be the key to unlocking a family's redemption and her own unexpected happiness? This story is a roller coaster of heart, peril, and the astonishing ways fate connects us. Before we dive in, tell us, what's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because you won't want to miss where this incredible story goes. Are you feeding her for free again? Asked Mrs. Gable, the owner of the cafe, arms crossed as she watched Sarah serve a heaping plate to the girl at table 7. You know we can't just give away food, Sarah. Business is bad. Sarah Miller, in her pink uniform and turquoise apron, bit her lip as she arranged the cutlery in front of Lily, the blind girl who came every day to sit by the window. It's not free, Mrs. Gable, Sarah murmured. I pay for it out of my salary. And with what money are you going to help your brother with college? Don't be foolish, child. Sarah continued serving the plate of green chilaquiles with chicken, ignoring her boss's gaze. The girl, with her dark glasses and perfectly combed black hair, smiled as she smelled the food. Smells delicious, Lily said. What is it today, Sarabella? It's a chef's surprise, Sarah replied, winking even though the girl couldn't see it. Try it and tell me if you like it. Mrs. Gable sighed and returned to the kitchen. Despite her harsh words, she had a heart of gold and would never forbid Sarah from helping the girl, even if times were tough. Sarah was 28 and worked double shifts at the Sea Glass Cafe, a small restaurant by the beach in Carmel by the Sea, California. Since her parents died in an accident 5 years ago, she had been taking care of her brother Michael, who dreamed of studying business administration. Money was never enough, but Sarah had learned to stretch every dollar. Do you like it? Sarah asked as she watched Lily eat with gusto. It's awesome, the girl exclaimed. But, Sarabella, why do you always bring me special food? I only ordered coffee. Sarah sat down opposite her for a moment. Because the chef needs someone to taste his new recipes, she lied with a smile. And you have a very good palate. Lily, 12 years old, smiled proudly as she continued eating. Sarah knew she lived with her grandmother near the cafe. She also knew, from what she had heard, that her father worked far away and could only send them a little money each month. While cleaning nearby tables, Sarah noticed 4 men in suits looking from outside. They seemed to be observing the premises, perhaps interested in buying it. Mrs. Gable had mentioned she might have to sell if things didn't improve soon. What a bummer it would be if the cafe closed, Sarah thought as she continued her daily routine. Not only would she lose her job, but Lily would lose her special place, and she would lose the opportunity to care for the girl who, unintentionally, had become an important part of her life. At dusk, when Sarah was finishing her shift, Lily was still at the table by the window. Isn't your grandmother coming for you today? Sarah asked as she took off her apron. She said she'd be late, Lily replied. She's working extra at the laundry. Sarah looked at the clock and then at the girl. I'll walk you home, sweetie. I don't like you being out alone so late. Lily felt grateful and took her white cane. Sarah said goodbye to Mrs. Gable and they went out into the street together. The sun was setting over the sea, painting the sky orange and pink. Sarabella, what color is the sky now? Lily asked as they walked. It's orange with a bit of pink, like a giant cotton candy, Sarah described. And the sea looks like melted silver. Lily smiled, imagining the scene. Someday I'll be able to see it, she said with conviction. My dad says there are doctors who can fix my eyes. I'm sure there are, sweetie, Sarah replied, feeling a pang in her heart. And when that happens, I'll take you to see the most beautiful sunset on the whole beach. As they walked along the cobbled streets, Sarah didn't imagine that this simple act of kindness would change her life forever. Nor did she know that upon turning the corner towards the building where Lily lived, She would discover something that would connect their destinies in ways she could never have imagined. "You live here?" Sarah asked, surprised to see the yellow 3-story building. "Yes, on the 2nd floor," Lily replied. Sarah was dumbfounded. "But I live here too, on the 3rd floor." Lily stopped, equally surprised. "Really? That's so funny. We've never run into each other." At that moment, the building door opened and an elderly woman with gray hair tied in a bun appeared. Her eyes lit up when she saw Lily, but then her gaze fell on Sarah with an expression of recognition. "You're the girl from the cafe, aren't you?" she said with a warm smile. "Mrs. Elena Petrova, at your service." Lily's grandmother. "Sarah Miller," she replied, shaking her hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you." "The pleasure is mine, dear. And thank you for looking after my granddaughter at the cafe. I know what you've been doing for her." Sarah blushed, not knowing what to say. Come in," Mrs. Petrova insisted. "We have a lot to talk about." Mrs. Petrova's small apartment smelled of cinnamon and freshly brewed coffee. Sarah sat at the kitchen table while the grandmother served 3 cups. Lily had gone to her room to change. "I know you've been feeding my granddaughter for months," Mrs. Petrova said bluntly as she passed Sarah a cup. "And I know you pay for it out of your own pocket." Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "Mrs. Petrova, I just—" "No, dear, I'm not angry," the old woman interrupted with a smile. "On the contrary, you're an angel sent from heaven." She took a sip of coffee and continued. "Alexander, Lily's father, was a highly respected businessman here in Carmel. He had a construction company that was doing very well. But his partner, a certain Victor Thorne, accused him of fraud." Mrs. Petrova took out a box of cookies from the cupboard and offered one to Sarah. "It was all a lie, of course. Victor wanted to take over the company. Alexander had to leave the country, not only to find work but to escape the accusations. He's in London, working day and night." Sarah listened attentively while eating a cookie. "And why didn't he take Lily with him?" "Because shortly after the problems began, Lily lost her sight. Doctors say it's a treatable condition, but the operation is extremely expensive. Alexander sends money every month, but it's never enough for everything. The operation, the rent, the food." At that moment, Lily returned to the kitchen, now in home clothes and without her dark glasses. Her eyes were a light brown, beautiful even though they couldn't see. "What are you talking about?" she asked, sitting next to Sarah. "About what a good cook I am," Mrs. Petrova joked. "And how much you love the food from the Sea Glass Cafe." Lily smiled. "Sarabella, can you teach me to cook something? I want to surprise Grandma when she comes home from work someday." "Of course," Sarah replied, enthusiastic about the idea. "We can start with something simple. How about some huevos rancheros?" The following weeks established a new routine. Sarah continued working double shifts at the cafe, but now, 3 times a week, she went up to Mrs. Petrova's apartment to teach Lily how to cook. It was surprising how skilled the girl turned out to be in the kitchen, despite not being able to see. Her sense of smell and touch compensated for her lack of vision. One afternoon, while Sarah was teaching her to make green enchiladas, Lily asked her a question that took her by surprise. "Sarabella, have you ever been in love?" Sarah almost dropped the wooden spoon. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" "I don't know," Lily replied, shrugging, as she kneaded the dough for the tortillas. "It's just that you're always working or taking care of your brother or teaching me things. Don't you have a boyfriend?" Sarah sighed. "I don't have time for that, Lily. My priority is Michael and his college." "My dad doesn't have a girlfriend either," Lily said casually. "Grandma says that since Mom died, he hasn't loved anyone else." Sarah felt a pang of sadness. She didn't know Lily's mother had died. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know." "It's okay," Lily replied with impressive maturity for her 12 years. "I don't remember her much either. She died when I was very little." At the cafe, things weren't going well. One afternoon, Mrs. Gable gathered all the staff after closing. "I'm not going to lie to you folks," she said, her voice breaking. "Business is getting worse and worse. If we continue like this, I'll have to close in 2 months. The silence that followed was heavy. For everyone, the Sea Glass Cafe was more than a job. It was a family. There must be something we can do, Sarah said, refusing to accept defeat. That night, while Sarah prepared dinner for Michael in their small apartment, she told him about the cafe's situation. Michael, 19, was as hardworking as his sister, but with a more modern mindset. He studied in the mornings at community college and worked part-time at an electronics store. What they need is to modernize, he said while typing on his laptop. Look, the Sea Glass Cafe doesn't even have a Facebook or Instagram page. How do they expect tourists to find it? Sarah looked at him, surprised she hadn't thought of that before. Could you help us with that? Of course, Michael replied enthusiastically. And we could update the menu too, add vegetarian options, fitness breakfasts for the health-conscious crowd. A spark of hope ignited in Sarah. Maybe, just maybe, they could save the cafe. The next day, she presented Michael's ideas to Mrs. Gable, who, though skeptical at first, agreed to try. They had nothing to lose. And I have another idea, Sarah added. What if we hire Lily to read the daily menu? We can write it in Braille for her. Mrs. Gable looked at her as if she had lost her mind. The blind girl? How is she going to help? Trust me, Sarah insisted. She has a beautiful voice and an amazing memory. Besides, it would give her some independence and a little money for her operation. Against all odds, the plan began to work. Michael created social media profiles and took professional photos of the dishes. Lily became the cafe's attraction, reciting the daily menu to customers, who were enchanted by the brave blind girl. Slowly, revenues began to improve. One afternoon, while Sarah was helping Lily with her homework, Mrs. Petrova showed them some old photographs. This is Alexander, she said, pointing to a handsome man in his 30s with the same dark hair as Lily. This photo is from before the problems. Sarah took the photograph and felt something strange as she looked at Lily's father. There was something familiar in his eyes, a kindness that reminded her of someone, but she couldn't quite place whom. He looks a lot like you, Lily, she said, returning the photo. He has your same dimples when he smiles. Mrs. Petrova put the photos away and looked at Sarah curiously. Your last name is Miller, right? Are you by any chance the daughter of Edward Miller, the accountant? Sarah froze, surprised. Yes, he was my dad. Did you know him? A melancholic smile appeared on Mrs. Petrova's face. It's a small world, as they say. Your father and Alexander were very close. Edward was Alexander's mentor when he started in business. Sarah was speechless. She never imagined there was a connection between her father and Lily's. Fate had intertwined their lives long before she started feeding a blind girl at table 7. What a twist! Sarah's father knew Lily's father. Do you think this is just a coincidence? Or is there a deeper connection waiting to be revealed? Let us know your theories in the comments. And if you're loving how this story is unfolding, give it a like. It helps us bring you more. One morning like any other, Sarah was preparing the tables for breakfast. The sun was just peeking over the marine horizon when she noticed something unusual. 3 black limousines had parked in front of the Sea Glass Cafe. What's with those cars? Mrs. Gable asked, peeking through the window. Do you think rich tourists are coming? Sarah shrugged, continuing to arrange napkins and cutlery. The last few weeks had been better for the cafe thanks to Michael's ideas and Lily's presence, who now came every afternoon after school to recite the special menu. The bell on the door chimed, and 4 men dressed in elegant suits entered. The one in front, a man of about 35 with perfectly combed black hair and intense eyes, scanned the place as if evaluating it. Sarah immediately noticed that everyone in the group treated him with deference. Good morning, Sarah greeted professionally. Table for 4? The man looked directly at her, and for a second, Sarah felt something strange, as if she should recognize him. Good morning, miss. Yes, please, near the window if possible. His voice was deep but kind. Sarah guided them to a table by the window overlooking the beach. Would you like to see the menu, or would you prefer to hear our daily specials? She asked as she served them water. The menu will be fine, thank you, the man replied, smiling slightly. As Sarah walked away to get the menus, she heard fragments of the conversation. Excellent location, Alex. Tourist potential. Safe investment. Alex. The name made Sarah almost stumble. Could it be? No, impossible, it had to be a coincidence. Upon returning with the menus, she observed the man more closely. He had something familiar, but she couldn't place it exactly. The men ordered full breakfasts and American coffee, speaking in low voices about business while they ate. Sarah was at the counter preparing more coffee when the bell chimed again. It was Lily, arriving for her afternoon shift, earlier than usual. Sarabella, the girl called from the door, her white cane extended in front of her. I finished my exams early and they let me out. Sarah quickly approached to guide her. That's great, sweetie, but it's still a while until your shift. Want some hot chocolate while you wait? At that moment, Sarah noticed that the man at the table by the window had gone completely still. His coffee cup halfway to his lips, staring intently at Lily. Lily? He whispered, so low it was barely audible. But Lily, with her hearing sharpened by her lack of vision, turned her head towards the voice. Dad? She asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Is that you, Dad? The man stood up so quickly he almost spilled his coffee. In 2 strides, he reached the girl and knelt before her, taking her small hands in his. My little girl, he said, his voice breaking. Yes, it's me. I came back, just like I promised. Sarah watched the scene paralyzed. It was him, Alexander Volkov. Lily's father had returned. The girl dropped her cane and extended her hands to touch her father's face, recognizing him with her fingers as she used to do with close people. You're different, Lily said. You have a beard now. Alexander laughed through tears. And you're taller. I almost didn't recognize you. The entire cafe had stopped to observe the emotional reunion. Mrs. Gable, coming out of the kitchen, was dumbfounded when she understood what was happening. The other men in suits watched respectfully from their table. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? Lily asked, not letting go of her father. I wanted to surprise you, Alexander replied. Besides, I wasn't sure exactly when I could arrive. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. The scene was beautiful, but it also filled her with a strange sensation. What would happen now with her cooking afternoons with Lily? Would the girl still come to the cafe? Alexander turned to her, as if just noticing her presence. Excuse me, miss. I'm Alexander Volkov, Lily's father. Sarah Miller, she replied, shaking his hand. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Something changed in Alexander's expression upon hearing her last name. His eyes widened slightly, and he squeezed her hand a bit tighter. Miller? Are you related to Edward Miller? He was my father, Sarah replied. Alexander released her hand slowly, visibly impacted. I can't believe it, he murmured. For years, I've been looking for you. You and your brother. Sarah looked at him, confused. You were looking for us? Why? Alexander looked around, noticing the attention they were receiving. Can we talk in private? He asked in a low voice. There's a lot I need to explain. Mrs. Gable intervened, approaching with a kind smile. You can use my office, she offered, pointing to a small room at the back of the cafe. I'll stay with the girl. Sarah nodded, still dazed, and followed Alexander to the office. Once inside, the man ran a hand through his hair, visibly nervous. I don't know where to begin, he said finally. Your father, Edward, was more than my accountant. He was my mentor, my guide, almost a second father to me. I know, Sarah replied. Mrs. Petrova told me something about that. Alexander nodded and continued. What you might not know is that before he died, your father made me promise something. He asked me to take care of his children if anything happened to him and your mother. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. When I learned about the accident, I was in the middle of the scandal with Victor. The accusations, the persecution, I couldn't fulfill my promise. By the time I managed to clear up part of the situation and look for you, you had disappeared. No one knew where you were. We moved, Sarah explained. We sold the house to pay debts and went to live with an aunt. Then she got sick, and we had to manage on our own. Alexander sat heavily in Mrs. Gable's chair. I've spent years looking for you. I wanted to help you to fulfill my promise to Edward. Now I find you here, taking care of my daughter. Fate has strange ways, Sarah murmured. More than strange, Alexander replied with a sad smile. Do you know why I came here today? To this specific cafe? Sarah shook her head. Because I'm looking for local businesses to invest in. I want to help Carmel's economy, especially after the crisis. And also, his voice broke slightly. This was Edward's favorite place. He brought me here the first time we met. He said the best ideas came with good coffee and a sea view. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. Her father, whom she missed so much, was still connecting their lives even after his death. Sarabella, Alexander said softly, using Lily's nickname for her, I've finally found you. Now I can fulfill my promise. Sarah came out of Mrs. Gable's office with her mind in a whirl. Alexander followed closely, his imposing presence causing several customers to turn and look. Lily was sitting at the counter, enjoying a hot chocolate, while Mrs. Gable told her stories about when her father was young. Everything okay? Mrs. Gable asked when she saw them return. Sarah nodded, though okay was the least adequate word to describe how she felt. Alexander approached his daughter and gently stroked her hair. Lily, I have a surprise for you, he said softly. I found a doctor in Boston who might be able to help with your eyes. The girl nearly jumped out of her seat. Really, Dad? Will I be able to see again? It's a possibility, Alexander replied cautiously. I don't want to promise something that isn't certain, but this specialist has had success with cases similar to yours. The cafe had begun to fill with the usual morning crowd. Sarah had to return to her duties, but the conversation with Alexander kept replaying in her head. Her father had trusted this man, had asked him to care for his children. Why had he never mentioned this to them? Mid-afternoon, when the cafe entered its quietest hour, Alexander returned alone. He sat at the counter and ordered an American coffee. Where's Lily? Sarah asked as she served his coffee. With Mrs. Petrova. They're packing some things to go to Boston, Alexander explained. The doctor can see us tomorrow if we leave tonight. Sarah felt a pang of sadness. Everything was happening too fast. I'm glad for her, she said sincerely. She deserves this opportunity. Alexander looked at her intently. Sarah, there's something else you should know, he said in a low voice. The reason I came with those men today? We're closing a deal to buy several local businesses, and I'd like to include the Sea Glass Cafe in the investment. Sarah almost dropped the cup she was cleaning. Buy the cafe, but not to change it, he clarified quickly. Quite the contrary. I want to preserve it, improve it, but maintain its essence. It was your father's favorite place, after all. Before Sarah could respond, the bell on the door chimed. A man entered the cafe, and the atmosphere changed instantly. Alexander tensed, his face transforming into a mask of cold composure. Well, the famous Alexander Volkov is back in Carmel, the newcomer said with a mocking tone. Is justice no longer chasing you? Sarah observed the man, tall, about 45, with salt and pepper hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Victor, Alexander replied in a controlled voice. What an unpleasant surprise. So this was Victor Thorne, the partner who had betrayed Alexander and falsely accused him. Sarah felt an immediate dislike for him. I heard you're buying businesses in the area, Victor continued, taking a seat next to Alexander uninvited. How curious. I'm also interested in expanding my investments. This is a small place, Sarah replied firmly. We don't serve those who aren't invited to sit. Victor looked at her, surprised, then let out a laugh. And who is this little spitfire? He asked Alexander. Your new conquest? Alexander stood up, his patience exhausted. She is Edward Miller's daughter, he said curtly. and I suggest you treat her with respect. Victor's face changed subtly upon hearing the name. Miller? Well, it's a small world, he murmured. Your mentor was always too honest for his own good, just like you. Honesty is not a flaw, Victor, Alexander retorted. Something you've never understood. Victor stood up, adjusting his expensive suit. We have unfinished business, Alex. Don't think that because the previous accusations were dismissed, you're free. There are always new ways of persuasion. With these words, he left the cafe as suddenly as he had entered. Sarah looked at Alexander, who seemed to have aged 10 years in 5 minutes. What did he mean? She asked. Alexander sighed deeply. Victor doesn't give up easily. When I managed to prove my innocence in London and began to rebuild my career, he swore he'd make me pay somehow. Now that I've returned with capital to invest, he's afraid I'll reclaim what was mine. Can he harm you? Not legally, Alexander replied. But he has contacts, influence. He could hinder my investment plans. Mrs. Gable approached, having heard part of the conversation. That man never gave me a good feeling, she commented. He used to come here a lot with your father, Sarah. Edward always treated him respectfully, but he told me privately that he didn't trust him. Sarah felt the pieces begin to fit together. Her father, always so reserved about his work, had probably been protecting them by not involving them in these complicated matters. Alex, Sarah said after a moment of silence, do you think my father? That his accident? She couldn't finish the question. The thought was too horrible. Alexander shook his head firmly. No, Sarah. I investigated thoroughly. It was a tragic accident, nothing more. Not even Victor would go that far. Sarah nodded, relieved but not entirely convinced. That night, in her small apartment, Sarah told Michael everything. Her brother listened without interrupting, his eyes wide with astonishment. So, your blind girl's dad turns out to be Dad's protege, Michael summarized when she finished. And now he wants to invest in the cafe and help us. Yes, Sarah replied. But there's something that doesn't add up. If Dad asked him to take care of us, why did we never hear from him before? Why did Dad never tell us about this promise? Michael shrugged. Dad was always very private about his work. Maybe he wanted to protect us. Or maybe, Sarah said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. Maybe Dad spent so much time with Alex that he didn't have time for us. The revelation hurt. For years she had idealized her father, but now she saw things from a new perspective. Edward Miller had been a great mentor to Alexander. But had he been equally present for his own children? The next day, Alexander stopped by the cafe before leaving for Boston with Lily. The girl was radiant with excitement. Sarabella, she exclaimed upon entering, recognizing the waitress's scent. We're going to see the special doctor, and when I come back, maybe I can really see you. Sarah hugged her tightly, feeling tears in her eyes. I'm going to miss you, sweetie. Alexander observed the scene with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something Sarah couldn't decipher. We'll be gone at least 3 months, Alexander explained. The treatment takes time, but I want you to know that I've spoken with Mrs. Gable, and we've reached a preliminary agreement about investing in the cafe. Sarah looked at him, surprised. So quickly. Time is of the essence, he replied. And I want to leave things in order before we go. I have a proposal for you, Sarah. I'd like you to be the cafe manager during my absence. Supervise the renovation, the changes, everything. But I'm just a waitress, she protested. I don't know anything about management or... Edward was the best accountant I knew, Alexander interrupted with a smile. Some of his talent with numbers must have been inherited by his daughter. Besides, you know this place better than anyone. Sarah looked at Mrs. Gable, who nodded approvingly. It's time someone else took on the responsibilities, dear, the owner said. These old bones need a rest. Between Lily's excitement for her treatment and Alexander's unexpected proposal, Sarah felt her life was changing at a dizzying pace. But there was one decision she had to make. Alex, she said finally, I accept the position, but on one condition. He looked at her expectantly. I want you to tell me everything about my father. Everything I don't know. The good and the bad. Alexander held her gaze for a long moment before nodding. It's fair, he replied. You deserve to know the whole truth about Edward. I promise that when I return, we'll talk at length. As she watched Alexander and Lily depart in one of the limousines, Sarah felt a mixture of conflicting emotions. Hope for Lily, unease about Victor's threats, resentment towards a father who had apparently prioritized his protégé over his own children, and a strange attraction to Alexander that she refused to fully acknowledge. What she didn't know was that the most important revelations were yet to come. 3 weeks had passed since Alexander and Lily left for Boston. The Sea Glass Cafe was in full transformation, with workers coming and going to renovate the facade and modernize the kitchen. Sarah, with a folder of blueprints under her arm, supervised every detail. The wood for the new tables arrives tomorrow, she informed Mrs. Gable as they reviewed invoices in the office. And the illuminated sign will be ready next week. Mrs. Gable watched in amazement as Sarah had taken on the role of manager with surprising naturalness. Who would have thought, dear? The older woman commented with pride. From waitress to boss in less than a month. Sarah smiled, though exhaustion was visible in her eyes. Between supervising the remodel and studying basic administration with books Michael had gotten for her, she barely had time to sleep. Have you heard anything from Alex and Lily? Mrs. Gable asked. Sarah nodded, taking out her phone. Lily sent me an audio message yesterday, she replied, playing the message. The girl's cheerful voice filled the small office. Sarah Bella, the doctor says the first surgery went super well. I still see very blurry, but I can distinguish shadows and some shapes. It's incredible. And guess what? I'm learning to play the piano. There's a teacher at the hospital who gives classes to the children, and she says I have a good ear. Dad says when we come back, he'll buy me one. I miss you so much. Tell me how the cafe is doing. Mrs. Gable discreetly wiped away a tear. That girl is a miracle, she murmured. And her father? Well, he's keeping his word. Sarah put her phone away, thoughtful. Alexander also wrote to her regularly, sending photos of Lily in the hospital and documents for the cafe renovation. Strictly professional, though sometimes he included a personal comment that made her smile. Leaving the cafe that afternoon, Sarah came face to face with Victor Thorne, who seemed to have been waiting for her. Miss Miller, he greeted with false cordiality. I see you're very busy transforming this charming establishment. Sarah stood firm, though her heart was pounding. What do you want, Mr. Thorne? Just a chat, he replied, smiling like a predator. I'm interested in knowing more about Alex's investment. I'm always looking for business opportunities, and it seems he's found a gold mine here. The Sea Glass Cafe is not for sale, Sarah replied dryly. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to. She tried to walk past, but Victor stopped her with words that chilled her to the bone. Do you know why your father spent so much time with Alex? He asked maliciously. It wasn't just for business. Edward knew things that could sink many powerful people, including me. Sarah stopped, turning slowly. My father was an honest man. Too honest, Victor retorted. And that's why he spent so much time preparing Alex, protecting him. He knew that someday he would need a clean ally in a very dirty world. I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah said, though a part of her was beginning to understand. Ask Alex about the Blue Tide project, Victor suggested. See if he tells you the whole truth about your beloved dad. With those enigmatic words, the man walked away, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. That night, in her apartment, Sarah couldn't sleep. Victor's words tormented her. What was the Blue Tide project? And why did she feel it was related to her father's absence during her childhood? She took her phone and wrote a message to Alexander. Victor approached me today. He mentioned something called the Blue Tide project. What is that? The reply came almost immediately, as if Alexander had been waiting. You shouldn't talk to him. He's dangerous. About your question. It's complicated. I'd prefer to explain it in person when I return. Sarah felt frustration grow inside her. More secrets, more waiting. She replied firmly. I deserve to know the truth now. If my father was involved, I have a right to know. Several agonizing minutes passed before the phone rang. It was Alexander calling. I didn't want to discuss this via message, he said without preamble. The Blue Tide Project was an investigation into corruption in government construction contracts on the coast. Your father discovered irregularities, diverted money, falsified permits. Victor was up to his neck in it. And what did you have to do with it? Edward recruited me as his inside informant. I was young, new to the business. No one suspected me. That's why we spent so much time together, planning, gathering evidence. Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. Are you telling me my father was some kind of undercover investigator? Not officially, Alexander clarified. But yes, basically. He was preparing a big case. He wanted to clean up the industry. And he was preparing me to continue his work if anything happened to him. The accident. Sarah couldn't finish the question. We could never prove it, Alexander replied gravely. But I always had my suspicions. The case stopped with his death. And shortly after, the accusations against me came. Very convenient for some. Sarah sat on her bed, overwhelmed by the revelations. Why did he never tell us anything? Why did he keep us out of it? To protect you, Alexander replied softly. He made me swear that if anything happened to him, I would take care of you, but without involving you in this. He wanted you to have normal, safe lives. Tears streamed freely down Sarah's face. All her life she had believed her father simply worked too much, that he preferred his career to spending time with his children. Now she understood he had been fighting corruption, risking his life for a greater good. And one more thing, Alexander continued after a moment. The money for Lily's operation. A significant part came from a fund Edward specifically left for emergencies. He had prepared everything, even that. Sarah felt as if the ground was moving beneath her feet. Her father had foreseen everything. He had tried to protect them even after his death. Why are you telling me this now? She finally asked. Why is Victor making moves? Alexander replied with concern. If he has approached you directly, he's desperate. I'm afraid he'll try something against the cafe or against you. What can I do? For now, keep your eyes open. I'm speeding up Lily's treatment so I can return as soon as possible. In the meantime, Michael should stay with you. Don't be alone. After hanging up, Sarah remained awake until dawn, processing everything she had learned. Her resentment towards her father had transformed into admiration and a new kind of pain. The pain of understanding too late the motivations of someone you had judged unfairly. The following days passed in a strange mixture of frantic activity and constant tension. Sarah threw herself into the cafe renovation with renewed energy, as if each new table, each freshly painted wall, was a tribute to her father. Michael temporarily moved into her apartment, bringing his laptop and books. His college classes had started, thanks to the scholarship Alexander had arranged for him. It's weird, isn't it? Michael commented one night over dinner. A month ago, it was just the two of us trying to survive. Now we have all these people helping us, looking out for us. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Dad put them in our path, she said softly. Alex, Lily, even Mrs. Petrova. It wasn't a coincidence. Another month passed. The cafe was almost unrecognizable, with its new navy blue facade, polished wooden tables, and a revamped menu that combined Mrs. Gable's classics with new gourmet options suggested by consultant chefs. The clientele had increased considerably, attracting both locals and tourists. The calls with Lily were the highlight of Sarah's weeks. The girl showed constant progress with her vision and had developed a remarkable talent for the piano. In their last video call, Lily had played her a simple but beautiful melody she had composed herself. I wrote it thinking of you, the girl had said with a shy smile. It's called The Waitress by the Sea. Sarah hadn't been able to hold back her tears. Alexander also seemed different in the video calls. More relaxed, smiling, sometimes letting slip a side of his personality she hadn't known before. They talked about the cafe, of course, but also about books, music, dreams. One afternoon, As Sarah was closing the cafe, she noticed an envelope on the floor, as if someone had slipped it under the door. No return address, just her name written in capital letters. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside, there was a single sheet with an ominous message. Ask Volkov about the Punta Diamante land. Some secrets are worth millions, or lives. Sarah felt a chill. Was Victor trying to sow doubt? Or was there something more Alexander hadn't told her? That night, instead of calling Alexander, Sarah did something she had never considered before. She investigated on her own. Michael helped her search for information about Punta Diamante, a luxury tourist development that had been shrouded in controversy years ago. Look at this, Michael said, pointing to an old article on his laptop. Project suspended after accusations of ecological damage and irregular permits. And here's Victor Thorne as one of the main investors. Sarah continued reading, and then she saw it. A photo from the original project presentation. In the background, almost unnoticed, her father was seen next to a young Alexander. Their serious faces contrasted with the smiles of the other attendees. They were there, she murmured, observing, gathering information. And look at the date, Michael pointed out. 3 months before the accident. The revelation left them in silence. Her father hadn't just been investigating. He had been in the line of fire, facing powerful interests. Sarah's phone rang, startling them. It was a message from Alexander. Good news. We're coming back in a week. Lily has a surprise for you. Sarah looked at the photo on the computer screen, then at the threatening anonymous message. Should she confront Alexander with her discoveries or wait to see him in person? Did she trust him completely, or had Victor managed to sow doubt in her heart? One thing was certain. The return of Alexander and Lily would mark a before and after in her life, and she had to be prepared for any truth that came to light. The day Alexander and Lily returned, the Sea Glass Cafe looked spectacular. Sarah had organized a small welcome party with the help of Michael and Mrs. Gable. Blue and white balloons decorated the ceiling, and a handmade sign read, "Welcome home." Sarah took one last look in the cafe's bathroom mirror. She had changed in these months. She was no longer just the waitress who secretly fed a blind girl. Now she was a businesswoman, a manager respected by employees and suppliers. Her hair, once always tied back, fell loosely over her shoulders. She had chosen a simple turquoise dress, the same shade as the sea visible through the windows. You look beautiful, dear, Mrs. Gable commented, entering the bathroom. Alex is going to be speechless. Sarah blushed. It's not for him that I dressed up, she lied. It's a celebration for Lily. Mrs. Gable smiled knowingly but didn't insist. In these months, her relationship with Sarah had transformed from boss employee to something closer to mother and daughter. The sound of a horn announced their arrival. Sarah hurried out, her heart pounding in her chest. The 3 black limousines parked in front of the cafe, identical to the ones that had brought Alexander that day that changed everything. The door of the first limousine opened, and Alexander stepped out, as elegant as she remembered, but with a different sparkle in his eyes. He walked around the vehicle and opened the other door. Lily emerged timidly, without her white cane. Her eyes no longer wore dark glasses. Sarabella, the girl exclaimed, looking around with wondrous eyes. I can see you. You're there. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears as she ran towards them. Lily met her halfway, throwing herself into her arms. The girl cried and laughed at the same time. I don't see perfectly yet, Lily explained between sobs of joy. Everything is a bit blurry, and I don't distinguish colors well. But I can see shapes, people. I can see. Sarah hugged her tightly, unable to speak. When she looked up, she met Alexander's eyes, who watched them with contained emotion. You did it, Sarah finally told him. The doctors did it, he corrected humbly. I just paid the bills. The celebration was beautiful and emotional. Lily kept looking at everything with amazement, discovering a world she had only been able to imagine until now. Regular customers from the cafe came to greet her, marveling at her progress. Mid-afternoon, when the party was in full swing, Alexander asked Sarah to accompany him to the office for a moment. "There's something I need to show you," he said with a serious tone that contrasted with the general joy. Once alone, Alexander took an envelope from his jacket. "I received your message about Punta Diamante," he began. "I know Victor has been trying to sow doubt, but instead of trying to explain it with words, I want to show you this." Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a letter, written in her father's unmistakable handwriting. "Dear Alex," it began, "if you are reading this, it's because something has happened to me. I trust you will fulfill your promise to care for my children, but discreetly without exposing them to danger. The investigation into Punta Diamante is almost complete. The documents are in the safety deposit box you know of. Use them wisely when the time is right, and please, tell my children that everything I did thinking of their future, of a more just world for them. Don't let them think work was more important than them. It was for them that I worked so hard. With eternal gratitude, Edward." Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears blurring her vision. The last lines lifted a weight she had carried for years. "I found it among his papers after the accident," Alexander explained. "I fulfilled my promise as best I could, although circumstances forced me to stay away." Sarah looked up, facing Alexander. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because there's no longer any reason to hide anything from you," he replied. "Victor has finally been formally charged in the Punta Diamante case. The documents your father compiled, along with others I obtained later, were sufficient. He can't harm us anymore." Sarah felt a wave of relief and justice. "So, it's all over." "That part of the story, yes," Alexander nodded. "But there's another that's just beginning. If you want it to." Alexander's eyes held a silent question, a hope. Sarah felt time stop. "What about Lily?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "She adores you," Alexander replied. "In fact, she has a surprise for you. But first, there's something I need to tell you, Sarah." Alexander took her hands in his. "These months apart, talking to you almost daily, watching you transform the cafe, listening to Lily constantly talk about you, made me realize something that perhaps was always there. Edward didn't just ask me to take care of his children. He spoke especially of you, of your strength, your kindness. I think even then he knew that." "That what?" Sarah insisted when Alexander paused. "That I could fall in love with you," he completed, with a vulnerability Sarah had never seen in him. And he was right. Sarah's heart leaped. For months she had fought her own feelings, convincing herself it was inappropriate, impossible. "I thought you only saw me as Edward's daughter, as a responsibility," she confessed. "At first, maybe," Alexander admitted. "But that changed quickly. When I saw you feeding Lily, expecting nothing in return. When I saw how you took control of the cafe, how you faced Victor, I saw an extraordinary woman, not an obligation." Sarah didn't know what to say. Too many emotions swirled within her. "I understand if you don't feel the same," Alexander continued. "Or if you need time. I just wanted you to know before." Sarah interrupted him, moving closer and taking his face in her hands. "I fell in love with you too," she confessed. "But I was scared. Of my feelings, of your past with my father, of everything." Alexander smiled, a smile that lit up his entire face. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "Now," Sarah replied, "we go see that surprise Lily has prepared, and then we'll see." They left the office hand in hand, a simple gesture that said more than 1,000 words. Lily was waiting for them next to a small electric keyboard Michael had set up in a corner of the cafe. "Finally!" the girl exclaimed when she saw them. "I thought you'd never come out. I want to play the song I composed for you." "For us?" Sarah asked, confused. "I thought the song was for me." Lily smiled mischievously. "That was the first one. This one is new. It's called My New Family." Lily's fingers flew over the keys, producing a sweet and hopeful melody. Though simple, it had a surprising depth for having been composed by a 12-year-old girl. When she finished, The entire cafe burst into applause. Alexander approached his daughter and hugged her proudly. "There's something else," he said, motioning to one of his assistants, who brought 2 envelopes. "This is for you, Sarabella," Lily said, handing one of the envelopes to Sarah. Her eyes, though still not seeing with total clarity, shone with excitement. Sarah opened it curiously. Inside was a legal document, the deed to the Sea Glass Cafe, in the name of Sarah Miller. "I don't understand," she murmured, looking at Alexander. "The cafe is yours now," he explained. "Mrs. Gable wanted to retire and agreed to sell it to me, but it was always meant for you. It's your legacy, from both your father and me." Sarah was speechless. The cafe, which had been her second home for years, now belonged to her. "And this," Alexander continued, handing her the second envelope, "is something that is entirely up to you to accept or not." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the second envelope. Inside were adoption papers for Lily, with Sarah's name as the adoptive mother. "Lily needs a mother," Alexander said softly, "and I can't think of anyone better than you. If you accept, of course." Sarah looked at Lily, who watched her expectantly. "Do you want this?" she asked the girl. "More than anything in the world," Lily replied. "You're already like my mom, Sarabella. We just need to make it official." Sarah felt her heart was going to burst with happiness. In a few short months, she had gone from being a lonely waitress to having her own business, an unexpected love, and now the possibility of being a mother. "Yes," she said finally, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. "Yes to everything." Alexander embraced her, and Lily joined the hug, forming a perfect circle. Mrs. Gable, Michael, and the others watched the scene with emotion. "Your father would be very proud," Alexander whispered in Sarah's ear. "Of both of us," she replied. "He brought us together, even without being here." Outside, the sun began to set over the sea, painting the sky orange and pink, just as Sarah had described it to Lily months ago. Now the girl could see it with her own eyes, albeit blurry. It was a new beginning for everyone, a second chance in life that none of them expected. And as the party continued in the renovated Sea Glass Cafe, the 3 limousines waited patiently outside, no longer as symbols of wealth, but as vehicles that would take the entire family, including Mrs. Gable, Michael, and the cafe staff, to a surprise celebration Alexander had organized on the beach. Because in this new story they were beginning to write together, no one would be left behind. 5 years later, a warm summer evening, 5 years after that day when 3 limousines parked in front of a modest cafe by the sea, Sarah's Place, as the Sea Glass Cafe was now known, celebrated its anniversary with a special party. The establishment had become a cultural landmark in Carmel by the Sea. With its elegant yet cozy decor, its menu combining traditional recipes with contemporary touches, and weekend musical performances, it was frequented by locals and tourists alike. On the small stage located in front of the panoramic window overlooking the ocean, a 17-year-old young woman adjusted her piano. Lily Volkov Miller, with her black hair tied in a high ponytail and bright brown eyes that could now see clearly after several additional surgeries, reviewed the sheet music of the piece she had composed especially for the occasion. "Nervous?" asked Michael, approaching with a tray of drinks. At 24, Sarah's brother was now a business graduate with honors, who, alongside his sister, managed not only the restaurant but also a foundation offering scholarships and job opportunities to underprivileged youth. "A little," Lily admitted with a smile. "It's the first time I'm playing something completely mine in front of so many people." "You'll do amazing, niece," Michael replied, winking. "Besides, you're already guaranteed entry to the Conservatory of Music. This is just practice." Lily nodded. In a few months, she would leave for Boston to begin her formal music studies, a dream that had emerged during her treatment and was now coming true. In the kitchen, Sarah was putting the finishing touches on a special cake. At 33, she had become a respected entrepreneur, though she remained the same warm and generous woman as always. Her hair, now with a few premature silver strands, was tied in a casual bun as she worked. "Mom, can we try the cake yet?" a little voice asked from behind her. Sarah turned to find two pairs of identical eyes looking at her hopefully. Eddie and Carrie, the 4-year-old twins she'd had with Alexander, were the spitting image of their father, with the same dark hair and mischievous smiles. "Not yet, little monsters," Sarah replied with feigned severity. "It's for the celebration." "But we're hungry," Eddie protested, the more vocal of the two. "You just had a snack half an hour ago," Sarah retorted, suppressing a smile. "That was a long time ago," Carrie intervened, with the same knack for exaggeration as her brother. A deep laugh sounded from the kitchen door. Alexander, as handsome as ever though with some gray at his temples, observed the scene with amused indulgence. "I think these two need a special mission," he said, approaching his children. "How about you go help Grandma Elena put the flowers on the tables?" The children darted off in search of Mrs. Petrova, who, in her 80s, was still active and energetic, insisting on personally making the restaurant's secret salsa. Alexander hugged Sarah from behind, gently kissing her neck. "5 years," he murmured against her skin. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday when I first walked into this cafe." Sarah turned in his arms, dabbing a bit of frosting on his nose. "And other times it feels like it's always been this way," she completed. "As if we've always been together." They kissed briefly, interrupted by the sound of clinking glasses in the main dining room. It was time for the celebration. The restaurant was full of friends, employees, and regular customers. Mrs. Gable, who now lived in a comfortable house near the sea, occupied a place of honor at the main table. Though officially retired, she still visited the restaurant almost daily, offering unsolicited advice and spoiling the twins. Alexander raised his glass to propose a toast. "To Sarah's place, to the family we've formed, and to Edward Miller, who somehow orchestrated all of this from beyond." The glasses clinked, and then everyone fell silent as Lily took her place in front of the piano. "This piece is called Tables by the Sea," the young woman announced, "and it's dedicated to all the people who, like my mother Sarah, see beyond appearances and change lives with small acts of kindness." Her fingers began to dance over the keys, creating a melody that started soft and nostalgic, like the early days when Sarah secretly fed a blind girl, and gradually transformed into something jubilant and triumphant, reflecting the journey they had all undertaken together. As the music filled the restaurant, Sarah looked around at the family she never imagined having. Alexander, her partner and love; Lily, the daughter of her heart, who would soon embark on her own path; the twins, who brought chaos and joy in equal measure; Michael, who had found his purpose; Mrs. Petrova and Mrs. Gable, the matriarchs who kept them all grounded. The sun was setting over the sea, painting the sky orange and pink, just as she had described it to Lily years ago. But now, the young woman could see those colors for herself, and she was creating her own way of describing them through her music. Outside, parked discreetly, 3 limousines waited to take the entire extended family on a special surprise Alexander had prepared. A trip to London, where Lily would give her first international concert before beginning her studies. Sarah smiled, thinking how a simple act of kindness, feeding a child who couldn't afford a full meal, had unleashed this wonderful life. The coincidences, the encounters, the revelations, everything had been part of a larger plan she was only just beginning to understand. And as Lily played the final notes of her composition, Sarah knew that true wealth wasn't in the success of the restaurant or the financial comfort they now enjoyed. It was in the family they had built, in the lives they had touched, and in the legacy of kindness they would continue, one table by the sea at a time. And so, a story that began with a quiet act of compassion blossomed into a testament to fate, forgiveness, and the extraordinary power of family, both the one you're born into and the one you build along the way. Sarah and Alexander's journey shows us that sometimes the deepest connections are forged in the most unexpected places, and that a father's love can echo through generations, guiding hearts back to where they belong. What do you believe in more, fate or the choices we make? Can a legacy of kindness truly change the course of our lives? We'd love to hear your beautiful thoughts in the comments below. If this story of intertwined destinies and heartwarming second chances resonated with you, please give this video a like, subscribe for more inspiring tales, and share it with everyone who believes that the greatest riches are found in the love we give and receive. Because sometimes, the most beautiful surprises are the ones you never saw coming.